Hey friends, welcome back to Lifestyle School, the podcast that helps you live leaner, stronger, and more energized by fixing your metabolism, not by chasing calories. I'm Hope, your coach and guide, and today we are diving into something that's everywhere right now, and that is high protein diets. I don't know about you, but I'm sure you've seen it. Protein is having its moment in the sun, right? Like everywhere you go on Instagram, it's eat more protein, hit your macros, protein is king. Whether it's the carnivore crowd or women who lift are talking about how they're eating 150 grams of protein a day, or influencers showing what they've eaten in a day. 90% chicken breast or protein bars. And, it's really, I think, gotten this aura of the holy grail of health and fat loss. And, the thing is, though, what works for an elite athlete with great metabolic flexibility does not necessarily work for someone with metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, and or blood sugar issues. In fact, it could be stalling your fat loss or even make it work. So today we're going to unpack it all. But before we dive in, I just want to say I'm not a doctor and this podcast is for educational purposes only. Always consult with your healthcare provider before starting any new supplements or making any big changes to your diet or lifestyle. So let's start at the very beginning when it comes to protein. So the first official dietary protein guidelines were established in the 1940s by the National Research Council during World War II. There was a lot of food scarcity around World War II. There was shortages. There was people starving in Europe. And the goal was to ensure military and civilian populations were getting enough essential nutrients, including protein, to avoid deficiency. And these early guidelines looked at what people were eating, and they put that recommendation a little bit higher than what the average was, and it ended up being 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And this was based on nitrogen balance studies. And just, for those people who aren't every day thinking about the kilogram to pound ratio. So the conversion is 2.2 kilograms, or let's see here. I always get this. So this is actually embarrassing because I'm not going to say this right, but the conversion is 2.2 or 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram. There we go. I got it. I didn't have it written down in front of me, and then I was like, wait, how do I say this the right way? So nitrogen balance, back to that, is a method that estimates protein needs based on how much nitrogen enters the body through protein in food versus how much is excreted. So if the body is in a nitrogen balance, it's assumed that protein intake is adequate. Okay, just to kind of give you an idea of what that means. The goal was to find the minimum amount needed to prevent deficiency. They weren't necessarily looking to optimize health, to build muscle, or support a healthy metabolism. They were just trying to get like a minimum amount. So this number that they came up with was 0.8 grams per kilogram. And I don't know if you've heard, but it's still the same today, pushing 100 years later. So over time, the official RDA hasn't changed much, but in the fitness and nutrition world, recommendations have shot way up. Now people are pushing 1.6 to even 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight, or sometimes more. So that's double or sometimes even triple the original recommendation. And why is that? Well, muscle gain. And then people also talk about satiety. If you listen to our podcast, it was one of the first episodes where we talked about leptin, we talked about satiety and cholecystokinin and peptide YY. And protein is a big part of that. But then also people talk about high protein diets for fat loss. And to be fair, in some cases, yes, it can definitely help. But it's really, really important to make sure that you are taking it in context, right? Because context really matters. And That's what no one is talking about when it comes to this conversation. I feel like protein is having its day in the sun as well as building muscle. And obviously, I'm all about both of those. Protein is super important, it's an essential nutrient. Your body needs amino acids to repair tissue, to support your immune function, to produce enzymes, and so much more. But here's what's critical. Eating more protein than your body can use doesn't give you bonus muscle, right? It gets converted into something else. If I could just eat protein and have a lot of muscles, that would be amazing. This process is called gluconeogenesis. Not sure if you've heard about it. I do talk about it once in a while, but it literally means making new glucose. And it happens primarily in the liver, and it's your body's way of creating sugar when it needs it. Like when you're fasting or maybe you haven't eaten any carbs in a long time, the body takes non-carbohydrate sources like amino acids, which is what protein is broken down into, and then it converts them into glucose. So this is a natural and very necessary process, especially for people who do low carb diets or, really strenuous activity. But when someone with insulin resistance eats excess protein, they're not using that protein for muscle repair or growth. The liver can start converting that extra protein into glucose. And what does that do? If you've been listening to this podcast, hanging out on my Instagram page, or been through lifestyle school, you know that that raises your blood sugar levels. And for someone with poor insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, it can result in chronically elevated insulin. And what that is going to do is it's going to block fat burning and keep the body in fat storage mode. And that's the last thing you want, honestly, if you're trying to lose body fat, right? So if you're over consuming protein and you're not using it to build muscle, your liver is converting it into glucose. It's spiking your blood sugar and it's keeping your insulin elevated. I'm going to say it again for the people in the back because I'm just like shooketh that no one is saying this about these high protein diets. And I have clients coming to me over and over and over again, like, hey, I'm doing carnivore and I'm not losing weight. Like, how am I not losing weight? I'm only eating meat and I'm not eating any carbs. How is this possible? Like, I just had a client that I'm currently working with. She had done all the things, but her last resort was carnivore. Her husband did carnivore, dropped a bunch of weight, and she did it for a number of months and like didn't lose a single pound. But, again, context matters. She has a history of high blood sugar levels, prediabetes, and we switched some things up with her. She's doing my 8-week personalized coaching program with Lifestyle School, and we switched up her macros. I didn't like, I'm going to say this very clearly. I didn't say, oh, you need to eat this many macros or this many macros, because we don't really do that in Lifestyle School. But it was more of like, let's focus on eating more fat. Let's titrate back the protein a little bit. Get some fasting in there, do these different things. And what do you know? In 5 weeks, she drops 11 pounds, So it's really, really important that people know if you're over consuming protein and you're not using it to build muscle, your liver is converting it into glucose. And if your insulin is elevated, you're not going to burn fat. So this is why some women who are eating clean, loading up on lean protein and protein snacks and still can't lose body fat. It's because their body is stuck in sugar burning mode, even without eating any carbs. I hate to break it to you. It's kind of depressing, but it's the truth. So I want to also, I kind of alluded to this, but I want to clear up a huge myth that and the myth is that eating protein builds muscle. Eating protein doesn't build muscle. You need a stimulus that is resistance training, specifically progressive overload, to build muscle. So that means that your progressive overload means your workouts have to gradually challenge your muscles more and more over time. So that could be like heavier weights or more reps or more intensity. And that's what signals your body to adapt and grow muscle fibers. Okay. So muscle protein synthesis. I hear this is talked about a lot. It's like, oh, if you eat 30 grams of protein or between 30 and 50 grams of protein, you trigger muscle protein synthesis. But then what people don't say is that that only happens when the body gets both the building blocks, amino acids from protein, and the signal training stress, right? You got to go lift those heavy weights to build muscle, right? Muscle protein synthesis can only happen with amino acids and strength training. So, no, I hate to break it to you, you can't sip on protein shakes and build muscle by osmosis. You have to actually train for it, right? And here's the kicker, if you're not lifting heavy enough or recovering properly, all that extra protein is doing it's not helping your physique. And it could be possibly harming your metabolic process. And so that's why I think it's just so important that we have this conversation about protein, about building muscle. Like, obviously, we want to build muscle. The more skeletal muscle that you have, especially as you age, the healthier you will be. And, muscles are like a storage container for glucose. So, the more muscle you have, the better glucose tolerance you are going to have. Like when you do eat carbs or maybe excess protein, because your body can take that glucose out of your bloodstream and store it in your liver and your muscles as glycogen to be used later when you're exercising or moving, you know? But it's there's a little more nuance that I think that always gets communicated on social media in these like 30 to 60-second clips. And so I think this is just a really important conversation. And I feel really passionate about it. And maybe that's coming across in this podcast. I feel like I'm getting a little ranty. So here's what's often missed. Protein can raise insulin, right? And I want to be clear, it's not as dramatically as carbs or carbohydrates, but it can and it does cause an insulin response, especially when you're doing it in larger quantities. And one thing I also want to say is that, eating a steak is also very different than having a highly processed protein shake. Or like a protein bar. A protein bar is essentially like a candy bar with some protein in it, and you're probably going to have a blood sugar response to that. It's probably going to spike your blood sugar because there's so many other things in it than just protein. Where if you just ate a steak, it probably wouldn't spike your blood sugar, within the next like hour, because your body has to, digest it and go through thermogenesis, all of the things, before it would potentially be, converted into glucose via the liver. But yeah. The quality of the protein, highly processed protein drinks or protein bars are not the same as a steak. I want to be very clear about that. Also, this is kind of a sidebar, but I'm constantly seeing on Instagram because it's cool to be like a high protein girly. And it's like, if you're trying to eat 150 grams of protein a day, like if you've ever tried it, I have actually tried it. I pretty much tried everything, guys. It is like a full-time job. It's very expensive because, you have to buy all that protein, but then protein is very satiating. So you're going to feel really full and you're going to be eating when you're not hungry, which I don't ever think is a great practice to like force feed yourself unless you're doing like some extreme training and you're really trying to put on muscle, whatever. But that's not my clientele typically. Typically, people I work with are trying to lose body fat, right? So again, different context. But eating that much protein can feel like a full-time job. And typically you end up having to rely on these like lower quality protein sources that are going to, even more feed into that dysregulation of your blood sugar. So, yeah, let me get back to my notes. I just like totally went off a tangent there. But the type of protein also is really important. And large amounts of protein, even if it's from good, high quality, non-processed sources, can raise your insulin, sadly. So, is someone with healthy insulin sensitivity going to do okay on an high protein diet? Yeah, of course they are, right? But someone with insulin resistance or someone who's like, just kind of dealt with this year over year over year, This is going to keep them locked in a metabolic loop, spiking insulin, storing fat, and then struggling to burn it. And, that's not what we want. We want like our body to be set up to just burn fat, right? So, metabolic flexibility is our body's ability to switch between burning carbs for energy and then burning stored fat for energy. And most women I work with and even men don't have that metabolic flexibility. The rates of metabolic dysfunction in the United States is about 88%. So most people like don't have a very good high functioning metabolism. Like they have some level of dysfunction. And this is going to doing something like this is going to keep them stuck in sugar burning mode. And no matter how many or I should say, how much protein they eat, they're not going to feel energized. They're not going to feel or get leaner. And, you know, you're not probably going to just like build muscle magically, like maybe you think is going to happen because, eating 30 grams of protein triggers muscle protein synthesis, right? Because you have to have the other piece of that, which is the resistance training. So, ladies, I want to talk to you. If you're eating like a male bodybuilder and your body isn't responding, this is probably why, right? You're not metabolically flexible yet. You're not lifting heavy enough or frequently enough for that extra protein to really be put to work. And then also, if you're trying to hit these really high protein goals, you're probably grazing all day, constantly stimulating your insulin on protein snacks, thinking you're being quote unquote good, but really you're just raising your insulin and staying on that treadmill that's blocking your body's ability to burn body fat. So I see this all the time, which is why I feel really, really strongly about it. So what we likely need is not more protein. It's better timing, it's better recovery, it's fewer insulin spikes, and a body that's ready to respond when we eat it, right? So here's a little roadmap for you. I think people wonder. I had this conversation with a client last week who's doing my 8-week personalized coaching program with Lifestyle School. And he was asking, like, how much protein do I need? And, I want to build muscle because when I finally lose all the body fat, I want to be able to see my muscles and I want them to grow. And it can feel like a chicken before the egg or the chicken or the egg, what came first conversation. But I feel like you can really do both. And I think if you are an undertrained individual, you definitely don't need high levels of protein when you're getting started on your weightlifting journey, your resistance train journey. And I mean, I've been a avid weightlifter for over a decade. I used to do competitive Olympic weightlifting. I have a lot of experience with that. And, I have a background as a personal trainer as well. Maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. But what I told him is like, we need to really focus on getting your blood sugar regulated, on getting your body optimized and like really good at switching metabolically between burning the food you're eating and then burning body fat. And then once we get closer to like your goal weight, then we'll strategically add in higher protein meals to fuel more of that muscle growth. So, yeah, I think you can do both. And I think sometimes it feels more complicated or it looks more complicated than it should be. And, if you find yourself in this spot and you're like, I just like don't know what's right or what to do, I would love to have a conversation with you about it. And I would obviously love to coach you through it as well if you have interest in my coaching program. So the roadmap is you got to heal your metabolism first, right? You have to lower insulin, you have to stabilize your blood sugar, and you have to reverse any insulin resistance that you have, right? And you have to start strength training. And then you have to eat protein strategically, enough to support your needs, but not extra. And then you have to pair that with resistance training that actually creates progressive overload. And then add in things like walking, getting enough sleep, sunlight exposure, stress management. Like these are not optional. These are like essential, right, to health. And I mean, really, all of these things are our main focuses at Lifestyle School in the coaching program, as well as in the course, the Lifestyle School for Weight Loss course. So, When we do these different things, our body becomes metabolically flexible. We burn fat efficiently. We build muscle when we train. And I mean, honestly, unless you are like spending 5 days in the gym and you are going hard in the paint, you probably don't need 150 grams of protein and 5 supplements. Maybe if you're a lean individual trying to put on muscle mass, especially like the later on in life that you get, yeah, your protein needs are going to increase. But again, I just like really want to hone on this point that the context matters. And so, like, just because that influencer that you follow is eating 150 grams of protein on the internet and is having really good results doesn't mean that's going to be the same for you, because there's a lot of factors that play into that. So, you need a system that works with your biology and not against it. I hope that's what you're kind of coming away with from this episode. So, a couple quick takeaways before we close. I want to make sure it's clear that I'm not anti-protein. I am pro-protein. We should be eating protein-centered or protein-centric diets because it's very satiating. It's very important for a bunch of different functions in our body, but too much just gets converted into glucose, which we don't want, right? Eating protein alone doesn't build muscle. You have to do resistance training, specifically progressive overload, right? You have to be going to the gym day after day and like getting after it. Another takeaway, and ladies, I hate to say this, but most women are under training and over snacking on protein. That is just like my frank observation, specifically for women who are trying to lose weight. We're not training hard enough or frequently enough to really like need these high protein diets. And then, if you're insulin resistant, high protein can really backfire. So I think it's good to know if you are insulin resistant. And then, I think my approach is let's heal your metabolism first, and then really work on like building muscle. You can definitely do both simultaneously. It's just like, you think of it as like a seesaw. You can't build a ton of muscle and lose a ton of fat at the same time. It doesn't really work super great, but you can build a little muscle while losing a lot of fat, I should say. And then once you've lost all that fat, then you can just put on a ton of muscle, right? So in closing, I'm sorry, guys, this was like a very ranty podcast episode. If you're feeling frustrated, stuck, confused about why your body isn't responding to your low carb, high protein, clean diet, like I just want this to be your wake up call that it's not your willpower, it's really your strategy. And this is exactly the kind of stuff we dive into in lifestyle school. I really am about showing you how to lose fat, build strength, and feel better without wasting time, really on plans that don't make sense from a biological level or a physiological level. So I just want to say thank you so much for being here. I do appreciate you giving me your time to listen to this episode. I hope, you had some really good takeaways from it. If you found it interesting, please share it with a friend. Tag me on Instagram at Hope Platt Coaching. And if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, send me a 5-star review, leave a comment. And if you're ready to take the next step, check out the link for Lifestyle School in the show notes. I would love to work with you and kind of guide you through this process. I only take a few clients at a time for my 8-week personalized coaching program, but I've had some really great results with my clients, and I would love to see you have those same results. So if you're interested in that, you can check out my website. It's www.hopeplattcoaching.com. All the details are on there. But with that, guys, thanks so much for being here. And we'll see you on the next episode. Until then, eat smart, train wise, and let's heal our metabolisms first.